morning light passed softly through the tall crystal windows of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. The light touched silver skin, armored shoulders, and floating bodies from 100 different species. It also touched one human woman standing quietly near the back of the hallway. Ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted her plain blue uniform and walked forward. She was used to the whispers. Tall zephyrines glided past her, their voices smooth and musical. Massive Korak warriors stomped through the corridor, their armor heavy and loud. Other species floated, slithered, or marched with pride. Humans walked, always calm, always polite, always ignored. Sarah had been the human representative for 3 years. In those 3 years, she had watched her people receive the worst of everything. When mining rights were divided, humans got the most dangerous asteroids, filled with radiation and little profit. When trade routes were assigned, human ships were sent through unstable sectors full of pirates. When colony worlds were handed out, humans received planets that others had already rejected. Each time, the human delegation smiled. "Thank you," they said. They never argued, they never protested, they simply adapted. Other species noticed. In quiet corners, Sarah often heard the comments. "Soft creatures," a Korak once muttered. "Servant species," a Zephyrian diplomat whispered. Even neutral species joked about humans bending without breaking. Sarah heard it all. She never reacted. She recorded everything. Inside the main council chamber, her seat waited at the far end of a massive curved table. It was smaller than the others, slightly lower, positioned where it was easy to overlook. She had requested a fair placement before. The request was denied, politely. Today's meeting was about a growing conflict between the Korak Empire and the Zephyrian Alliance. Both wanted control of valuable systems in the Outer Rim. Human colonies were located there too. No one mentioned that. The council leader, Thane of the Korak, stood up. His deep voice shook the chamber. "These Zephyrines steal what belongs to us. If they do not withdraw, we will remove them by force." The Zephyrian delegate responded coldly. "These systems belong to no empire. If war begins, it will not be our fault." They argued for hours. Other species took sides based on profit and power. Some calculated how much they would gain. Others calculated how many ships they might lose. No one asked the humans what they thought. Sarah sat quietly, taking notes on her data pad. But she wasn't just writing summaries. She was recording fleet numbers, supply lines, political tensions, personal habits of military leaders, trade dependencies, fear patterns. Humans had become very good observers over the past 50 years. When the meeting finally ended without solution, Sarah approached Ambassador Sindenar, one of the few diplomats who sometimes treated her kindly. "If war breaks out," Sarah asked softly, "will civilian evacuation be arranged for our colonies?" Sindenar's tentacles shifted. "War is unfortunate, Ambassador. Civilian losses are expected. Your people are adaptable. You always survive." Sarah nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, "we do." Later that evening, back at the human embassy, Sarah sent her daily report to Earth. The public message was calm and professional, but attached to it was another file, a much larger file. It contained 50 years of observation, 50 years of patience, 50 years of learning. Out her window, Nexus Prime glowed with confidence. Millions of beings believed humans were weak. They believed kindness meant helplessness. They believed patience meant fear. Sarah allowed herself the smallest, coldest smile. For 50 years, humanity had been studying, and soon the galaxy would learn what the quiet ones had really been doing. But the lesson would not begin in a council chamber. It would begin with fire falling from the sky. The war began exactly as Sarah had predicted. 3 months after that council meeting, Korak battle fleets struck Zephyrian mining stations in the Outer Rim. Within days, Zephyrian forces answered back. Entire systems lit up with weapons fire. And right in the middle of it all, human colonies. New Geneva was one of them. Captain Maria Santos stood on the observation deck of the orbital station, staring down at the planet below. Green fields stretched across the surface like a peaceful painting. Farmers were harvesting crops. Children were walking home from school. It was beautiful. It had taken 20 years to build. A voice broke the silence. "Captain," Lieutenant Park said carefully, "we're receiving a transmission from the Korak First Fleet." Maria straightened her uniform. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life, revealing General Krexar. His dark armor was scratched from battle. His yellow eyes burned with impatience. "Human leader," he growled, not bothering with her rank. "This world now belongs to the Korak Empire. You have 24 hours to evacuate. After that, we begin operations." Maria kept her voice steady. "General, this is an agricultural colony. 12,000 civilians live here. We need more time. The harvest is nearly complete. The food will help feed refugees from this war." Krexar laughed. It sounded like metal grinding. "We are not interested in your plans. The soil contains minerals required for our war. Leave immediately." "We need 1 month," Maria insisted. "We will provide full mining data. Our geological teams have mapped everything." The general leaned forward. "You are in no position to negotiate." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Lieutenant Park swallowed hard. 17 Korak heavy cruisers just entered the system. Maria activated colony-wide communication. "All residents of New Geneva, begin evacuation procedures immediately. Stay calm, follow assigned routes." For 18 hours, transport ships worked without rest. Families grabbed what they could carry. Parents tried to comfort crying children. Farmers looked back at fields they had planted with their own hands. Some refused to leave until the last moment. 6 hours before the deadline, the Korak fleet opened fire. There was no warning, no mercy. The first beams struck the grain silos. Towers of food exploded into flames. The sky turned red. The ground shook. "They're targeting evacuation zones," Lieutenant Park shouted. Transports trying to escape were hit mid-flight. Maria watched from orbit as fire spread across the farmland. Every field was burned, every structure destroyed. It wasn't just military action, it was punishment. In 4 hours, 12,000 civilians were dead. Farmers, teachers, children, elderly colonists who could not move fast enough. When it ended, New Geneva was silent. Smoke rose from the surface like a funeral veil. 3 days later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood again in the Galactic Council chamber. Her face was calm, her eyes were not. "The Terran Federation withdraws from all galactic treaties," she announced clearly, "effective immediately. We declare a state of total war against the Korak Empire and any who support them." The chamber erupted in laughter. A Zephyrian delegate actually clapped. "Humans declaring war?" someone mocked. "With what? Farmin' tools?" General Krexar's voice boomed across the chamber. "We tremble before your anger." The laughter echoed. Sarah waited. Then she spoke again. "For 50 years we have been patient. You mistook that for weakness." The laughter slowly faded. "You taught us that only strength earns respect." Her gaze swept across the room. "The message you sent to New Geneva was received." She turned toward the exit. "And now," she said quietly, "we will send our reply." The doors closed behind her. For the first time, the laughter did not return. The Korak fleet that destroyed New Geneva believed the lesson was over. They did not know they had just become the first example. Admiral Voskin of the Korak Third Fleet was not worried. Why would he be? His battle group included 47 warships. 6 of them were massive dreadnoughts capable of breaking planets apart. His crews were experienced. His weapons were tested in dozens of wars. And his enemy? Humans. The species that farmed rocks and said thank you when insulted. Voskin stood proudly on the bridge as the fleet approached Kepler-7, a human mining colony. Intelligence reports said it was lightly defended. "Any military presence?" he asked. "None detected, Admiral," the tactical officer replied. "No defensive fleet, no orbital platforms." Voskin nodded. "Good. We will make this quick." The fleet moved into bombardment formation. Far below, the human colony looked ordinary. Small cities, mining towers, cargo ships docked quietly in orbit. Nothing threatening. Open fire. Energy beams and kinetic rounds rained down on the surface. Buildings exploded. Mining facilities collapsed. The planet trembled. For 10 minutes, everything went perfectly. Then, "Admiral, we have interference." "What kind?" "Long-range communications are offline." Voskin frowned slightly. "Continue." The attack resumed, and then the human ships appeared. Not from hyperspace, not from behind a moon. They simply were there. 63 vessels surrounded the Korak fleet in a perfect sphere. "They weren't there 5 seconds ago," the sensor officer shouted. The ships looked strange, smooth surfaces, no visible weapons, no heavy armor. They moved like living creatures gliding through water. Voskin felt his first spark of unease. "Target them. Fire at will." The Korak fleet unleashed everything: plasma cannons, particle beams, quantum torpedoes. The human ships were untouched, not because they dodged, because every shot missed by impossible margins, as if the humans already knew exactly where each weapon would strike. "It's like they're predicting our fire," someone whispered. Then the humans attacked. They did not fire beams. They released hundreds of small metallic spheres. "Point defense," Voskin ordered. Lasers destroyed the spheres easily. But each sphere exploded into a cloud of silver dust. The dust drifted slowly, almost beautifully. Then it touched the first Korak cruiser. Its armor began to dissolve, not explode, dissolve. Perfect round holes formed across the hull. Air and crew were sucked into space. Within minutes, the cruiser was nothing but a floating skeleton. "It's spreading," the tactical officer cried. The silver dust multiplied. Ship after ship began breaking apart. Powerful war machines turned into drifting debris. "Retreat!" Voskin shouted. But hyperspace drives would not activate. Navigation systems failed. Weapons overheated. Escape was impossible. For 6 hours, the Korak fleet tried to fight an enemy it could not hit, could not outrun, and could not understand. When it was over, 47 warships were gone. Not damaged, gone. And not a single human vessel had been destroyed. 3 days later, one human ship appeared above the Korak capital world. It broadcast a message. "This is Commander Sarah Chen. We are returning your fallen." What followed stunned the Empire. The wreckage of Voskin's fleet was arranged across the 3 moons of the capital world. Twisted metal and frozen bodies formed massive letters visible from the planet's surface. The message was simple. "You started this." Panic spread across the Korak Empire. Recruitment dropped. Soldiers requested transfers. Some deserted. For the first time in centuries, the Korak were afraid. But what frightened them most was not the destruction. It was the realization that humans had not reacted with rage. They had responded with precision. This had not been revenge. It had been preparation. And somewhere in the quiet shadows of galactic space, human fleets were already moving again. The Korak had lost one fleet. They believed they could recover. They did not yet understand. The war was not about fleets. It was about control. The destruction of the Third Fleet was only the beginning. At first, the Korak Empire told its citizens it was a rare tactical failure, a surprise attack, an accident, nothing more. But then, the supply depots started disappearing, one by one, across 5 star systems. Entire fuel stations vanished overnight. Ammunition transports never arrived at their destinations. Repair yards were found drifting as broken metal in empty space. No warning, no distress signals, no survivors. Ships would wake from standard sleep cycles and discover they had no fuel left. Their tanks were dry, as if the fuel had never existed. Panic began spreading quietly through the military ranks. Double security, commanders ordered. Triple patrols. Did not help. Scout ships sent to investigate strange signals never returned. Early warning systems detected nothing until explosions were already happening. And then came the messages. Private channels inside Korak warships began receiving audio files, recordings of their own families, children laughing at home, spouses talking about their day, proof that humans could reach into the heart of the empire whenever they wished. The message was never spoken directly. It didn't need to be. You are not safe. General Krexar, the architect of New Geneva's destruction, was found dead in his secure quarters. No forced entry, no wounds, no poison detected. He had simply died in his sleep. On his desk lay a single flower, a bright blue bloom that once grew in the fields of New Geneva. The fear inside the empire became something heavier than panic. It became dread. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian Alliance made a mistake. Believing humans were too focused on the Korak War, they secretly sold advanced weapons technology to the Empire. It was profitable, it was distant, it felt safe. 1 month later, 7 Zephyrian research facilities suffered catastrophic accidents on the same day. Reactor failures, gravity collapses, AI systems turning against their own operators. Decades of research were destroyed in hours. There was no evidence of human involvement. But exactly 1 hour after the final explosion, a message reached Zephyrian High Command. Neutrality means not supporting our enemies. Choose wisely. They chose quickly. All contracts with the Korak Empire were canceled within the hour. Across the galaxy, species began to whisper. This was not normal war. Humans were not conquering territory. They were dismantling power, and they were doing it without open battles. In secret council meetings, nervous leaders reviewed their history with humanity. Every trade negotiation, every insult, every unfair treaty. A disturbing pattern emerged. For 50 years, humans had accepted the worst terms. They had volunteered for undesirable work. They had requested assignments in empty systems no one cared about. At the time, it seemed pathetic. Now, those worthless systems were discovered to contain hidden human installations, listening posts, supply bases, shipyards built in silence. The quiet species had been building something, not loudly, not proudly, but carefully, very carefully. The galaxy began to understand something terrifying. Humans had not spent 50 years being weak. They had spent 50 years preparing. And for the first time in galactic history, the major powers were afraid of the polite species at the end of the table. But fear alone would not stop them. Soon they would attempt something desperate. They would unite. And when the galaxy unites in fear, it creates monsters. The galaxy believed one thing. If every major power joined together, even humans could not win. They were about to test that belief.
The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest in history. Representatives from every major species filled the massive chamber. Even minor worlds sent observers. The air felt heavy with fear. No one laughed anymore. Council leader Thane looked older. His powerful voice no longer carried arrogance. "In 6 months," he began, "the humans have destroyed nearly half of the Korak military strength. Entire fleets have vanished. Supply networks are gone. This is not conventional warfare." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegate stood slowly. "Our research facilities were destroyed without warning. Simultaneous strikes across multiple systems. No fleet detected." The Dracaran representative added, "We reviewed our history with humanity. In every negotiation, they accepted poor terms. At the time, we thought them foolish." A pause. "We were wrong." Silence followed. For 50 years, humans had watched. They learned fleet formations. They studied political rivalries. They mapped economic choke points. They built bases in forgotten systems. They placed workers inside supply chains. They created something invisible, a network. "We must unite," declared the Vorthan representative. "No single empire can defeat them alone." For once, there was no argument. The Grand Alliance was formed within hours. 15 major powers combined their strength. Korak dreadnoughts, Zephyrian advanced shields, Volani intelligence systems, Dracaran assault cruisers, merchant guilds, supply fleets. Even peaceful species contributed support vessels. 3 months later, 12,000 warships gathered at the Kepler Nexus, the largest military force ever assembled. Ships filled space in every direction, massive carriers, heavy destroyers, precision strike craft. Admiral Thexmore of the Zephyrian Navy stood aboard the flagship Unity and stared at the endless formation. "Nothing can stand against this," he said quietly. The target was clear. Kepler 7, the same human system where the first Korak fleet had fallen. Intelligence suggested it was now a central hub of human operations. The plan was simple: overwhelming force, total destruction. "Prepare for hyperspace jump," Thexmore ordered. 12,000 ships entered hyperspace together. 6 hours later, they arrived, and immediately confusion spread across the fleet. "There's no planet," a sensor officer said slowly. "What?" Thexmore demanded. "Kepler 7 is gone. Only debris remains." The human colony had been destroyed, not by the Alliance, by the humans themselves. Cities were rubble, mines collapsed, orbital structures dismantled. It looked like the system had been abandoned deliberately. A transmission appeared on every screen. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood calmly before them. "Welcome to Kepler 7, she said gently. "We knew you were coming. We cleaned up before you arrived." Admiral Thexmore stepped forward. "Surrender. You cannot defeat a fleet this size." Sarah smiled faintly. "You're correct. We cannot win in open battle." She paused. "That is why we already won." Alarms began ringing across the Alliance fleet. Fuel reserves reading empty. Ammunition stores missing. Life support supplies gone. Ship after ship reported the same impossible truth. Their tanks were dry.
their weapon systems drained, their food and water supplies vanished. How? Thexmore whispered. 50 years of preparation. Every supply depot you used, every maintenance crew, every transport contractor. We were there. Images appeared on the screen. Human workers in coveralls, technicians in repair bays, dock workers dismissed for decades as harmless labor. They had never been harmless. They had been waiting. You taught us that strength matters, so we made sure you had none. A single human frigate appeared near the helpless fleet. We are sending transports. You may surrender peacefully or drift until your systems fail. 12,000 warships, defeated without a shot fired, and the galaxy understood something chilling. Humanity did not fight fair. They fought smart. The Grand Alliance had fallen in a single move, but the war was not over. Now humanity would decide what the galaxy deserved. The surrender of the Grand Alliance fleet changed everything. 12,000 warships, once the pride of the galaxy, now floated helplessly under human control. Their crews were transported peacefully to holding facilities. There were no executions, no torture, no revenge. That frightened the galaxy more than violence would have. Humans were not acting in anger, they were acting with purpose. Within weeks, human fleets appeared in key systems across known space, not firing, not invading, just present, watching. Supply chains were quietly reorganized, military shipyards were shut down, heavy weapons were confiscated and dismantled. The Korak Empire officially dissolved after its remaining leadership signed unconditional surrender documents. Their homeworld was not destroyed, it was preserved, but their government was gone. Their fleets were gone, their power was gone. Across the Zephyrian territories, political restructuring began. The alliance broke into smaller, independent systems under human supervision. Their advanced technologies were shared openly, not for domination, but to prevent monopoly. The merchant guilds were placed under strict trade fairness regulations. Exploitation contracts were erased. Debt slavery systems were abolished overnight. And in the Galactic Council chamber, everything changed. Ambassador Sarah Chen now sat at the head of the curved table. The same simple blue uniform, the same calm face, but no one ignored her seat anymore. Representatives spoke carefully, respectfully, sometimes fearfully. Quarterly reconstruction reports are ahead of schedule, said the Dracaran delegate. Former military worlds have transitioned to agriculture and industry. Sarah nodded. Good. Continue integration programs. Former Korak soldiers were now farmers, engineers, builders. Under supervision, yes, but alive, fed, given work. War zones in the Outer Rim transformed into shared development zones. Species that once fired on each other now built cities together. It was efficient, it was stable, it was peaceful. But beneath that peace was something unspoken. The galaxy knew who held control. Security protocols expanded everywhere. Communication monitoring, movement tracking, behavior analysis systems. When one delegate nervously asked about reduced surveillance, Sarah answered calmly. 2 years ago, 12,000 ships came to erase us. We will not be surprised again. No one argued. Outside the council windows, Nexus Prime thrived. Trade flowed smoothly. Crime rates dropped. Refugees returned home. Children across dozens of species grew up without hearing war sirens. It was everything the galaxy had claimed to want. Peace, prosperity, order. But it came under human oversight. One evening after session ended, Ambassador Sinandar approached Sarah quietly. "Do you ever miss the old days?" he asked. "When humans were less powerful?" Sarah considered that. Do you mean when we were insulted and ignored? Sinandar hesitated. I mean when power was shared. Sarah walked to the window and looked at the peaceful traffic patterns outside. In the old system, she asked softly, how many wars were fought over the outer rim? 7 major conflicts in 2 centuries, he admitted. And how many now? None. Sarah turned back toward him. That is the difference. She gathered her files. We offered fairness once, she said. It was rejected. Then she left the chamber. Sinandar remained standing alone, staring at the memorial plaque near the entrance. It listed the names of the 12,000 civilians who died on New Geneva. Below the names was a simple inscription. They asked to be equals. You taught them to be rulers. The galaxy had peace now, but peace built on a lesson learned too late. And somewhere deep in human command centers, long-term projections were still running because humanity had learned something else as well. Peace must be maintained, and maintenance requires preparation. The galaxy believed the story was over, but humanity never stops planning, and not everyone was ready to accept human rule.
For 2 years, the galaxy remained peaceful. Trade increased, borders stabilized. Former enemies worked side by side in development zones. Children from different species attended the same schools. On the surface, it looked like a golden age. But peace does not erase pride, and pride does not disappear quietly.
In hidden corners of the former Korak territories, small meetings began taking place. Not large gatherings that would attract attention, just whispered conversations between former officers who remembered the glory days. They called themselves the Restoration. They believed the Korak Empire had not been defeated fairly. They believed humans had cheated. They believed strength should rule. Across several minor systems, similar thoughts formed. A Zephyrian industrial magnate who lost political influence, a Dracoran commander forced into civilian life, a handful of merchant leaders unhappy with new regulations. Different species, same anger. They did not openly rebel, not yet. They studied human systems carefully, and what they found gave them hope. Humans were strong, but humans were stretched thin. Oversight across hundreds of systems required enormous coordination. Human fleets were powerful, but carefully distributed to prevent concentration of force. The Restoration began sharing information quietly. Human security depends on information control. Disrupt communications. Strike symbolically. Their first move was small. A data relay station in an outer system suffered a coordinated cyber attack. For 6 minutes, human monitoring went blind in 3 sectors. Nothing major happened during those 6 minutes, but the message was clear. They could create gaps. Next came sabotage at a reconstruction site. Machinery malfunctioned. No one died, but the project halted for days. Minor incidents. Testing responses. Human investigators arrived quickly each time, calm, efficient, quiet. No public punishments followed, which confused the conspirators. They are afraid to escalate, one Restoration leader claimed confidently. They fear losing moral authority. That belief gave them courage. They planned something larger. On the anniversary of the New Geneva massacre, they would broadcast a galaxy-wide declaration, a call to reject human oversight, a demand for independence. Symbolism mattered. What they did not realize, human analysts had already detected unusual financial transfers, unusual encrypted traffic, unusual travel patterns between former military officers. Humans had built their empire on observation. They had not forgotten how to watch. Deep inside a secure operations center on Earth, Commander Elena Morales studied holographic projections of the suspected network. 47 primary actors, she said calmly. 3 financial backers. Estimated total support under 2% of regional population. A junior officer looked nervous. "Do we move now?" Morales shook her head. "Not yet. Let them gather. Let them commit." "Why?" She met his eyes. "Because a shadow rebellion must be exposed fully, or it becomes a legend." On Nexus Prime, Sarah Chen received the same intelligence summary. She closed her datapad slowly. "History repeats itself," she murmured. Sindanar, standing nearby, sensed tension. "There is trouble?" "Only a reminder," Sarah replied. "Peace requires vigilance." The anniversary approached. Across several systems, hidden transmitters were prepared, speeches recorded, symbols revived. The Restoration believed they were about to spark a movement. They did not know that every message draft had already been copied, every meeting location mapped, every escape route calculated. On the morning of the anniversary, before the rebels could broadcast a single word, every leader of the Restoration was arrested simultaneously. No violence, no public spectacle, just silence, and a single message delivered privately to each supporter. "We prefer peace. Do not force us to prefer something else." The rebellion ended before it began, but the incident left something behind, a quiet question spreading through the galaxy. If humans can see everything, what can they not see? The Restoration failed, but their question did not disappear. And somewhere beyond mapped space, something was watching humanity in return. The failed rebellion should have been the final disturbance. It wasn't. 3 weeks after the Restoration arrests, a deep space monitoring station near the edge of chartered territory went silent. Station K-47 was small, only 12 crew members. Its job was simple: observe gravitational patterns beyond mapped space and report unusual activity. When it stopped responding, human command assumed technical failure. A patrol ship was sent. It found nothing: no debris, no distress signal, no station. The structure had not been destroyed. It had not drifted away. It was simply gone. At first, command kept the information classified. No need to create fear. But then it happened again. Another station, different sector, gone. This time, long-range sensors detected something strange before contact was lost. A distortion, not a ship signature, not a known energy pattern, more like space itself bending incorrectly. Commander Elena Morales studied the data carefully. "It's not an attack," she said quietly. "It's a presence." Sarah Chen was informed within the hour. "Outside the map?" she asked. "Yes." The phrase carried weight. For decades, galactic species had expanded confidently, assuming known space was all that mattered. The regions beyond were considered empty, dangerous perhaps, but irrelevant. Humans had mapped further than most, but even they had limits. A decision was made. No public announcement. A reconnaissance fleet would investigate beyond the boundary. 5 human vessels, designed for deep space endurance, slipped quietly past the last beacon of known territory. The galaxy did not notice, but something out there did. 3 days into the mission, Captain Arjun Rao of the exploration cruiser Horizon reported unusual readings. "Gravitational patterns are fluctuating without mass sources," he said calmly. "It's like we're inside a ripple." On the 4th day, stars began disappearing, not exploding, not dimming, vanishing from sensors. "Visual confirmation?" Command asked. They're still visible to the eye, Rao replied slowly, but instruments say they're not there. On the fifth day, the horizon sent its final message. We are not alone. Then silence. No explosion, no debris, just absence. Human command centers did not panic. They calculated. Within hours, dozens of deep space probes were redirected. Defensive fleets shifted quietly closer to outer systems. Sarah Chen convened a private emergency council. Only trusted representatives attended. We have encountered something beyond our current understanding, she said calmly. Fear flickered in alien eyes. Is it hostile? We don't know. That was worse. Sinindar's tentacles trembled slightly. You defeated the galaxy. Can you defeat this? Sarah did not answer immediately. For 50 years, humanity had prepared for internal threats. They had studied politics, warfare, economics. They had planned for betrayal. They had not planned for this. Finally, she spoke. We will not repeat the galaxy's mistake. What mistake? Arrogance. Human research divisions activated emergency protocols. Old theoretical projects once dismissed as unnecessary were reopened. Experimental propulsion systems, exotic matter studies, unfinished defense platforms. Across human space, shipyards began building something new. Not warships meant to intimidate neighbors, but vessels designed to survive the unknown. The galaxy watched nervously. For the first time since humanity rose to power, the humans looked uncertain, not afraid, but serious. And far beyond the mapped stars, something massive shifted. It had noticed the probing lights of humanity, and it was beginning to move closer. The galaxy thought humans were the ultimate power, but beyond the map, a greater force was coming. And this time, humanity would not be fighting for dominance. They would be fighting for survival.
The first outer colony fell without a battle. Epsilon 9 was a small development world near the edge of human-controlled space. Its population was mixed: humans, Zephyrians, even former Korak citizens working side by side. One moment, it existed. The next, every long-range sensor showed distortion. Space twisted like heat rising from fire. Ships in orbit reported impossible readings. Then the stars above the colony blinked out. Not darkness, not destruction, erasure. Within minutes, the system was unreachable. No debris, no radiation, just silence. Panic rippled through the galaxy. This was not rebellion, not sabotage, not war. This was something else. Human command did not waste time. Evacuation orders were sent to all frontier systems. Civilian transports moved inward. Defensive fleets formed layered perimeters around key regions. For the first time since taking power, human warships gathered in massive numbers. But they did not gather to intimidate. They gathered to hold a line. In a secure command chamber on Earth, Sarah Chen stood before representatives of dozens of species. You once feared us, she said calmly. Now you fear something else. No one argued. Sinindar spoke quietly. What is it? Sarah activated a hologram of deep space readings. We believe it is not an invasion fleet. It is not a species as we understand it. The image shifted, showing waves of gravitational distortion. It behaves like a cosmic predator. A chill filled the room. It consumes systems, not resources, not life selectively, entire star systems. Why now? Someone whispered. Sarah's expression tightened slightly. Because we reached it. Human expansion, deeper than any species before, had crossed a boundary.
The galaxy had always fought over territory inside a small pond. They had never considered what lived in the ocean beyond. A young Zephyrian delegate asked the question everyone feared. Can it be defeated? Sarah paused. We don't know. That answer would have caused chaos years ago. Now it caused silence. Human scientists presented a theory. The entity, or force, seemed drawn to high concentrations of energy and organized space-time patterns. Advanced civilizations acted like bright signals in the dark. The stronger a civilization became, the brighter it glowed. Humanity, after uniting the galaxy, had created the brightest signal in history. They had painted a target on themselves. Across shipyards, construction accelerated. Massive structures began forming near the frontier, devices unlike anything built before. Not pure weapons, stabilizers, anchors, experimental engines designed to reshape gravitational patterns. The goal was not to destroy the unknown, it was to contain it. But time was short. Another system vanished. Closer this time, refugee ships barely escaped before distortion consumed everything behind them. Human fleets engaged the edge of the anomaly for the first time. Weapons fire disappeared into warped space. Energy beams bent and vanished. Then one experimental device activated. For a brief moment, the distortion slowed. It recoiled slightly. Proof. It could be affected, but at tremendous cost. The device burned out instantly, its core collapsing. Begin full activation of the Horizon Protocol, Sarah ordered calmly. Around her, alien leaders watched humanity prepare to fight something that did not care about politics, pride, or power. And for the first time, the galaxy did not see humans as rulers. They saw them as guardians. As the third system began to flicker, Sarah whispered quietly to herself, "We will not let another New Geneva happen." This time, the line humanity drew would not be against an empire, it would be against extinction. The galaxy had crossed a line once before. Now the universe itself had crossed one. In the final confrontation, humanity would prove why you never mistake patience for weakness.
The anomaly reached the fourth system. This time, humanity was ready. Hundreds of ships waited at the edge of distortion, not in panic, not in chaos, in formation. Behind them, evacuation convoys moved civilians farther inward. Humans, Zephyrians, former Korak, dozens of species together. There were no arguments now about leadership. There was only survival. In Earth's command center, Sarah Chen stood beside Commander Elena Morales. Around them, screens displayed shifting waves of bent space. The distortion pulsed like a living thing. "It's accelerating," an analyst said. Sarah nodded. "Activate Horizon Protocol, all anchors." Across the frontier, massive stabilization platforms powered on. Rings of energy formed between stars. Experimental gravity anchors locked into place. For a moment, space screamed. Ships trembled, hulls strained. Several support vessels shattered under pressure, but the distortion slowed. It pressed forward like a tide meeting a wall. Human fleets did not fire wildly. They targeted precisely, reinforcing weak points in the containment grid. Every move calculated, every sacrifice intentional. On the main display, a model updated constantly. The anomaly was not mindless. It was reacting, adjusting, testing. "It's learning," Morales whispered. "So are we," Sarah replied. The next phase began. Human scientists activated something no other species knew existed, a project hidden even during the war for galactic control, a resonance field. For decades, humans had studied gravitational harmonics, the way massive objects
sing in space-time. The anomaly consumed systems by destabilizing those harmonics, so humanity responded with harmony. Instead of attacking, they amplified. The resonance platforms projected stabilizing waves into the distortion, a counter-frequency, a pattern of order pushing back against chaos. The effect was immediate. The anomaly shuddered. Stars that had begun to fade flickered back. Space stopped bending. Across the fleet, cheers almost broke out, but Sarah raised a hand. Hold positions. The anomaly pushed one final time. Ships were crushed. 2 anchors imploded, but the resonance held. Slowly, the distortion began retreating. Not destroyed, not chased, but pushed beyond the boundary it had crossed. Silence followed. The stars returned fully. Long-range sensors confirmed it. The anomaly was moving away, back into the dark beyond the map. It would not forget humanity, but it would think carefully before approaching again. Hours later, exhausted fleets powered down. Reports came in. Hundreds of ships gone. Thousands of lives lost. Not just human, all species. And for the first time since humanity rose to power, the Galactic Council chamber filled not with fear, but gratitude. Sinandar stood and bowed deeply. "You did not rule us today," he said. "You protected us." Sarah looked around the chamber. Years ago, this same room had laughed at humanity. Now it stood because of them. "We were never interested in ruling," she said quietly. "We were interested in surviving together." A memorial was built on Nexus Prime, not only for New Geneva, not only for the war, but for the day the galaxy stood united against extinction. The inscription read, "Strength is not cruelty. Power is not dominance. True leadership is standing when others cannot." In private, Sarah stood once more at the viewing window overlooking the city lights. Sinandar joined her. "Will humanity loosen its control now?" he asked carefully. Sarah thought for a long moment. "Yes," she said at last, "because now you understand why the control existed." The galaxy had once mistaken patience for weakness. Then it mistook power for tyranny. Now it understood something deeper. Humanity had never wanted to be masters. They had simply refused to be victims. Beyond mapped space, faint distortions still moved in the darkness. But this time, the galaxy was not divided. It was prepared. And at the center of that preparation stood the species that once sat quietly at the end of the table. No longer ignored, no longer underestimated. Humanity had drawn a line, and this time, nothing crossed it. The end. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.